This video today is about my story as a reluctant landlord. I call myself an accidental landlord because that was never really my goal, and I kind of hate it, to be honest. I see real estate as this kind of golden handcuffs, and I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about that. In this video, I'm going to discuss the history of the properties that I purchased. This is going to be very high level. If there is any interest in this video, I might do a more detailed version to go into the experiences individually, but for now, I'm really going to keep it high level. I'm also going to talk about my experience, going over the benefits and the drawbacks, as well as the lessons learned and some final thoughts that I have. But first, here's a little bit about me. Hi, welcome to my channel. Thank you for watching. Here's a little bit about me. My household consists of myself, my husband, and my toddler. My mom also lives with us, but she's not included in our finances. We live in a high cost of living city in the Northeast. My husband and I both went to graduate school, but fortunately, we no longer have student loan debt. I work in banking and he works in aviation. I take care of the family's finances, and I love my role as the self-appointed CFO. I love to talk about all things money, whether it's investing, saving, or making money. I look forward to sharing a wealth building journey with you. I look forward to getting to know you, and I hope you enjoyed this video. All right, let's get started. The first property that I bought was when I purchased my first house in my 20s. After college, I ended up not moving out as quickly as I thought I would, and I ended up saving enough money to put 20% down towards a property. This was a property that was purchased as a primary residence, and that was after the great financial crisis and the subprime mortgage crisis. My timing could not have been better. Property values were really in the gutter at that point, and I was able to get into something that for me at the time was considered the top of my budget, but it was still a pretty decent discount relative to where prices had been before. It was a 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath townhouse in a city of 100,000 residents right outside of Boston. It had access to public transportation, it was close to shopping and dining, it had a really cool nightlife, and it had some amenities like having your laundry right in your unit. There was an attached garage, which may not sound like a big deal to other people, but when you live in an area where it snows a lot, that matters. I ended up getting a roommate to split the cost. It was a Craigslist roommate, and we lived together for about 18 months. And I did everything that I could to keep lifestyle inflation at bay in order to replenish my savings to that money that I had depleted when I used it for a down payment and towards my closing costs. I drove the same old beat up car that I had for years, and I really just didn't care what people thought of me. I was working towards my future. If you are enjoying this video so far, don't forget to hit the like button so the algorithm knows that it's good, and of course subscribe for more content. If you think any of the information that I provide here might be helpful to somebody else, be sure to share it with them. But then something happened. I met a guy and he told me he loved me and he wanted to get married, which was pretty cool. Then that meant that we were back on the hunt looking for another house. Just a couple of years after I purchased my first house, my husband wanted to buy a house for us as a family. We ended up buying another house intended to be a primary residence, and we purchased that one with 10% down payment, and that one had all of the features of what we would call a forever home. The idea was that we would stay in it for as long as we could afford it, and as long as our life and our careers allowed us to do so. It had a yard, it had a room to grow, we had a 2-car garage, nice neighborhood with good schools. We were expecting to continue living in the house and grow with the home. Even though at the time that we bought the house, we knew it was way bigger for what we needed at the time, but we also knew that we wanted a family. Well, this is the house that we live in now, and we still reside there today. The reason why this property comes into play, even though we still live in it and it's not a rental, it's because we were able to get approved for the loan to purchase this house without having to sell the townhouse that I previously owned before marriage. Initially, we were on the fence about what we would do regarding the townhouse, but ultimately I decided that it would be worth it to see if we could advertise it as a rental because it was in a really attractive location and had some really cool amenities. amenities, the worst that could happen is that we couldn't get it rented, we would sell it, and we would roll the proceeds over into the new home. Well, it turns out that that property was in much higher demand than we could have possibly imagined. We got it rented very quickly. Really, it was our ability to purchase the house that we live in now without having to sell the townhouse that allowed us to turn the aforementioned townhouse into a rental property. Hopefully that did not confuse you. If there's anything that you don't understand, please leave me a note in the comment section below and I'll see if I can be more clear about it. Now on to property number 3. About a year after I got married, my dad started talking to me about retiring. He knows that I'm very interested in personal finance and financial independence. He told me that he had a little bit of cash and he was wondering what is the best way for him to invest his cash and prepare himself for retirement. It is also important to note at the time my dad was living in a different state. One of the things that he mentioned that was important to him was his ability to move closer to where I lived. Since I had a positive experience with my first property, I told him that I thought it would be worth the effort if he could purchase a property either near me or in the city for him to move into when he retires. My suggestion to him was to buy the property, that I would manage it for him, and when the time came for him to retire, he could move in. Because that was supposed to be a property that was intended for his retirement, we took some things into consideration. We didn't want it to be too big. We wanted to consider single floor living. We wanted a multitude of options for transportation because even though he had a car, you just never really know what's going to happen. So I thought that maybe it would be good for him to have access to public transportation. And that was a feature that I knew would also make it easier for us to be able to rent it out. I looked actively and I was able to snap up a foreclosure for really, really cheap. We ended up in a 2-bed, 1-bath condo in Boston that we purchased for less than $200,000. Of course, we had to put a good amount of money into it to repair it. And even when you account for the fact that we had to put money into it to repair it, the overall costs were still pretty favorable. At the time, the market had not yet recovered. It was also a foreclosure, which made it unattractive to other people. We decided to rent the unit out while he worked. I would pay all of the expenses with the rent money that came in, and then I would send him the excess profits he could put towards whatever he wanted. That was the plan, but unfortunately he ended up passing away about 2 years after we did that transaction. And given that I have no siblings, when he passed away, everything that he had ended up being mine, including the property. So far, here is my experience. Initially, I felt like this is pretty easy. I have a pretty good screening process, which has led me to having decent tenants overall. I am willing and able to address issues in a timely fashion, which has prevented deterioration of the premises. I am also seeing the tax benefits. When we do repairs, we are able to deduct them. Not to mention that depreciation is used to offset any rental income that you get, and you are also deferring your taxes. There are more tax benefits to owning real estate as an investment, but I'm not a tax advisor, so you'll have to do some research of that on your own. And given those benefits, I looked at this and I said, should I do more? And the answer is yes, I did do one more. I partnered with a friend for a third rental. Although at that point, I did determine that I did not want to do this alone because it does require attention unless you are a complete slumlord. You need to be available to some extent and you need to be responsive. The person that I partnered up with, in exchange for a higher equity, they decided to do the full management of the property. This one became even easier. I'm not getting as much in profit because I am splitting it with somebody else, but I'm not doing any of the work. The question again that comes up is, do I want another one? Do I want more? Well, here's my thought process. All of the properties are well maintained or they're recently updated. That limits tenant complaints about severe issues that you might have at the property. But there's still some minor issues that you're going to face, and there's going to be routine maintenance that you have to coordinate. You have the occasional slow drain, you have the broken mailbox, you have to coordinate snow removal, which itself is a liability because it's not like you can just say, hey, I'm not going to do it. I also had one set of problematic tenant. That tenant who was allowed to have 1 dog ended up with 3 dogs. To hide the fact that they had 3 dogs, they decided to never walk the dogs and instead let the dog go into the neighbor's yard, who then contacted me and complained. Getting those constant calls and having to threaten eviction was kind of a turnoff. In addition to that, that there is the process where the unit turns over. In the event a tenant decides not to renew their lease, or you decide that you don't want to deal with that tenant anymore, that rent stops, and then you have to make sure that the property is back in the condition that it should be in before it goes back on the market, and then your screening process starts all over again. And that screening process is pretty time consuming because there's some interesting people out there who might be looking to rent an apartment, but you're not interested in them. And you do spend a lot of time filtering either really bad or even maybe marginal tenants before you find a really good quality one. All of this can be outsourced to a property management company, but you are going to lose about 10% of your rental income to that property manager because evidently they do not work for free. Now, let me ask that question again. Do I want more property? Do I want a fourth rental? The answer is unequivocally no. This is not backbreaking work, guys, but it does take more time than any other type of investment that you're going to have. More properties means that you have to put in more effort, and other areas that matter are going to suffer. For example, every time I have an appointment to go show a rental, I leave my house to go do that. That is time that I'm not spending with my family. That evidently other areas in my life are more valuable and more important than my rentals. Number one is family, which is obvious. And then the other thing that is more important than my rental is my job. My job pays better. My job is a lot less volatile. My job respects my boundaries. My job cannot call me in the middle of the night to tell me that they need a plumber because they clogged the toilet. My job is not going to tell me that they don't have the rent money. They're not going to tell me that they can't pay me this month. That is never going to happen. Well, I guess it potentially could happen, but I would probably sue them. Also, my job can't sue me. My tenants can. I decided that I don't want more rentals. Not now, not ever. I have 3, and that is it for me. You're probably wondering, if you hate it so much, why don't you sell? The number one reason is the capital gains tax. The jump in value since I have purchased these rentals would lead to a huge tax bill. You have to remember that while the other 2 properties were intended to be primary residences, they have not been primary residences in a long time. There is a time limit that you can be out of a house before you stop being eligible to be exempt from the capital gains tax. I simply do not want that tax bill, and I am going to continue deferring it for as long as I can. Also, from what I am seeing, it is only going to get more difficult for people to buy in the future. And I think I would be doing a disservice to my child if I have a property that he could either later use as a rental himself or even a place for him to live in at little to no cost in order to get a leg up in life. I would be doing him a disservice if I got rid of that today. I have to think long term, and I think holding on to those properties facilitate my son and to try and give him a leg up. But I also know that there is the sentiment that landlords are leeches and parasites. In addition to being a leech and a parasite, I guess, am I hoarding? Am I contributing to the high real estate prices? And I do have an answer for that. My answer is as follows. BlackRock is buying entire developments and turning them into rental communities. Investors are paying cash, and they're paying 5 and 6 figures above the asking price. You have builders that are building luxury properties rather than starter homes because that's where the profits are, and they want to increase their margins. And ever since COVID disrupted the market, the supply chain issues that we have been facing have caused a spike in construction materials and labor costs. Take into consideration the fact that some areas are zoning for very low density housing. The house that we live in right now is zoned for a minimum of 1.25 acres. That is the neighborhood that I live in. There's actually a town over has a neighborhood zoned with 3 acres minimum. These are the things that are contributing to the housing crisis, guys. Not me holding 2 measly rentals that were bought to be primary residences and a third one that that I'm sharing with a partner. I'm not the problem here. With that said, would I do anything differently? To that, I also say no. Golden handcuffs are handcuffs, but they are still gold. Owning these properties have led to a massive jump in my net worth due to market conditions and the low interest rates. And when I do my net worth videos, I am going to go into more detail about the different asset classes that I have. I also think it is a legacy for my offspring because, as I mentioned, I think it's only going to be more difficult for people to purchase in the future, and it makes more sense for me to prepare for him in the event that it becomes harder as time goes on. There is one thing that I would modify a little bit. At the time I was deciding whether or not I wanted a fourth one, I was saving a lot of cash because I wanted to be ready to have a down payment in the event that I found a property that I like. By the time I decided that I did not want any more properties, I had missed out on a lot of gains in the market, and this is money that I could have been dollar cost averaging into index funds the entire time. If I was going to do something differently, I would have modified my plans. I would have probably planned on getting those 2 rentals, maybe that third one with a friend, but then I would have known that was going to be it for me, and then any money that came in, I was going to gradually invest it in the market, or I would have maxed out my 401k, maxed out my husband's 401k, rather than just letting it sit in cash. If there's any regret that I have, is more related to how long it took me to decide that I didn't want to do anything else. With the ones that I have so far, when it comes to their location, the level of interest that they have, the timing, which allowed me to pay rock bottom prices for them, it is simply amazing, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. If you've made it this far, I appreciate it. Thank you for watching and sticking with me. I want to hear from you as always. I do have a couple of questions for you. The first one is, do you aspire to build wealth through real estate? Is that part of your journey? And if so, in what way? Are you looking for cash flow as a landlord, or are you looking to build equity through maybe flips and speculative investments? The next question that I have is, how real do you think my reasons are for not wanting to sell the properties that I have, even though I talk about hating being a landlord? Is it possible that I have some emotional attachment to those properties? It's not a trick question. I'm really curious to see what people think. So leave me a note in the comment section below, or even better, if you want to make a video response, that's just as good. I would like to continue sharing my thoughts on all things money with you. So I would appreciate it if you could help out the channel by liking this video and sharing it with anyone you think might benefit from it. If you want to see more content, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can know when new videos come out. I'll see you in the next one.